The wind howled across the Arctic ice sheet like a living thing, carrying crystals of snow that stung any exposed skin. Dr. Kim Taman pulled his thermal hood tighter around his face and checked the readings on his tablet for the third time that hour. Something was wrong with the data, and he didn't like things that didn't make sense. Behind him, the research station sat like a small orange dot against the endless white landscape. His team had been here for 6 weeks, studying how the ice was melting faster than anyone had predicted. It was important work, necessary work, but right now Taman was staring at numbers that shouldn't exist. "Are you seeing this?" Dr. Park Minji's voice crackled through his radio. She was 50 meters to his left, working with her own ground-penetrating radar equipment. "Please tell me your scanner is broken too." Taman squinted at his screen. The radar showed something large buried deep in the ice about 200 meters down. The shape was too regular, too geometric. "Mine shows the same thing." "It's massive." "That's not ice formation," Minji said. Her voice had that excited edge that Taman had learned to recognize over their 10 years of working together. It usually meant she was about to suggest something risky. "That's metal. A lot of metal." Lee Junho trudged over to them, his equipment pack bouncing on his back. The young engineer had been setting up weather monitors on the ridge. "What did you find?" "Your voices sound weird." Taman showed him the tablet. "There's something down there. Something that doesn't belong." Junho studied the screen, his eyebrows rising. "Could be a crashed plane from World War II. They lost a lot of aircraft in the Arctic." 200 meters deep? Minji shook her head. The ice accumulation rate would put that object at approximately 50,000 years old. There were no planes 50,000 years ago. "Could be a meteorite," Taman offered, though he didn't believe it himself. Minji was already moving, her boots crunching through the snow as she circled the area with her scanner. "Meteorites don't have right angles. Look at this edge here and here. This was constructed." Choi Hana emerged from the research station waving at them. The youngest member of their team was supposed to be analyzing core samples, but she had clearly noticed their excitement. She jogged over, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. "What's happening? Did we find something cool?" "Define cool," Junho muttered. "We found something impossible." For the next hour, they mapped the object from every angle. The more data they collected, the stranger it became. The object was roughly cylindrical, about 60 meters long and 20 meters wide. Its surface showed patterns that could be hull plating or armor. Deep scans revealed hollow chambers inside and what might be machinery. "We need to report this," Taman said finally. "This is beyond our mission scope." "Report what exactly?" Minji challenged. "That we found something we can't explain. They'll send a team that will take months to arrive. By then, the ice shelf could shift. We could lose the site entirely." Taman knew that look in her eyes. "You want to drill down to it?" "We have the equipment," Minji said. "We have the thermal drill for ice core sampling. We could reach it in maybe 2 days." "That's not what the drill is for," Taman protested. "We're climate scientists, not treasure hunters." Junho cleared his throat. "Actually, I've been thinking about it. The drill could handle it. We'd need to set up a proper shaft with stabilizers, but it's doable. The real question is whether we should." "We absolutely should," Hana said, her eyes bright with excitement. "This could be the discovery of the century, maybe in all of history." Taman looked at his team. Minji was practically vibrating with eagerness. Junho had that thoughtful expression that meant he was already planning the technical details. Even young Hana, usually so careful and by the book, was caught up in the moment. He thought about protocols, about proper channels, about all the regulations they would be breaking. Then he thought about the object buried in the ice, waiting for 50,000 years, 2 days, he said. "If we can't reach it safely in 2 days, we stop and call for help." They worked through the night setting up the thermal drill and creating a stable shaft through the ice. The drill hummed and hissed as it melted through layer after layer of ancient frozen water. Each meter they descended felt like traveling back in time. The ice at this depth held tiny bubbles of atmosphere from ages past, from before human civilization existed. Hana monitored the core samples as they came up. The ice around the object shows signs of rapid freezing, like something very hot suddenly became very cold. "A crash landing," Minji breathed. "It crashed here and the impact melted the ice, then it refroze around the hull." By the end of the second day, they were close. The drill's sensors showed only 5 meters of ice remaining. Taman had barely slept, surviving on coffee and adrenaline. His hands shook slightly as he monitored the final descent. The drill broke through. Air hissed up from below, equalization of pressure after millennia of isolation. Junio quickly lowered a camera probe down the shaft. The small screen showed darkness at first, then metal. The surface was dark gray, covered in patterns that looked almost like writing but weren't any script Taman had ever seen. "I'm going down," Minji announced, already pulling on her climbing harness. "We should test the atmosphere first," Taman said. "The sensors show it's safe. Just very dry air, almost no oxygen content. Whatever was down there, it's not alive anymore." Minji descended into the darkness with Junho right behind her. Taman and Hana watched through the camera feeds attached to their helmets. The lights from their headlamps played across a surface that gleamed despite its age. The metal showed no corrosion, no decay. "This alloy," Junho said, his voice full of wonder. "I've never seen anything like it. It's not steel, not titanium. The molecular structure looks almost crystalline." Minji moved along the hull until she found what looked like a seam. She traced it with her gloved fingers, and suddenly lights flickered to life. Panels glowed with soft blue luminescence, revealing symbols and diagrams. "It still has power," she whispered. "After 50,000 years, it still has power." They found an opening, a hatch that had been partially damaged in the crash. Together, Minji and Junho managed to widen it enough to slip through. The interior was pristine, preserved in a vacuum seal that had kept everything exactly as it had been the day it arrived. "Taman," Minji's voice was barely audible. "You need to see this. Right now." Taman didn't hesitate. He clipped into the rope and descended into the ice shaft, into the impossible ship that shouldn't exist. When he emerged inside, his breath caught in his throat. The chamber was circular, with walls covered in those strange glowing symbols. In the center, on a raised platform, lay a figure in elaborate armor. It was tall, at least 3 meters, with proportions that were almost human but not quite. The face behind the transparent helmet was peaceful, dignified, and completely alien. "We're not alone." Hana's voice came through the radio from above. "We were never alone." Taman stepped closer to the figure, and as he did, something activated. A hologram flickered to life above the platform, showing the same alien figure but alive, moving, beginning to speak in a language that sounded like music and mathematics combined. Their discovery was only beginning. Commander Tae-sung stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, staring at the display screen with growing confusion. The signal had been playing for the past hour, and every time he heard it, something inside his chest tightened. It was not just sound or data. It felt like sadness, like someone crying in a dark room with no one to hear them. "Play it again," he said to Dr. Hana, who sat at the communications station. Hana pressed a button. The signal filled the bridge once more. Mathematical patterns wove through frequencies that seemed to pulse with emotion. Tae-sung felt his throat go tight. He looked around at his crew. Every human face showed the same thing: concern, sadness, the need to help. "Sir, we have received a message from the Concordance," said Lieutenant Dae-hyun from the security station. "Ambassador Kyungmin is calling." The screen changed. Ambassador Kyungmin appeared, her face serious. Behind her stood Velthar, the insectoid overseer from the Concordance. Velthar's multiple eyes reflected light in ways that always made Tae-sung uncomfortable. "Commander," Kyungmin said, "I understand you have detected the signal from Sector 771 Omega." "Yes, Ambassador. We picked it up 3 days ago. It seems to be a distress call. Someone needs help." Velthar's mandibles clicked together in what the translator called a sigh. "Humans, always so quick to respond. Commander, that signal has been broadcasting for over 3,000 galactic standard years. Every species in the Concordance has heard it. Every species has chosen to ignore it." Tae-sung frowned. "Why?" "If someone is in trouble, the signal is forbidden," Velthar interrupted. "It speaks of things better left unanswered. All civilized species know this instinctively. When we first hear it, something in our minds tells us to turn away. It is dangerous. But humans do not feel that way," Hana said quietly. "We hear it and we want to investigate. We want to help." Velthar's eyes fixed on her. "That is because your species is young. You evolved on one world, alone, without contact with the greater galaxy. You did not develop the proper mental defenses. You hear things you should not hear. You feel things you should not feel." Tae-sung felt anger rising in his chest. "You are saying we should ignore someone calling for help?" "I am saying," Velthar said slowly, "that there are good reasons the signal has been ignored for 3 millennia. 847 species have heard it. 847 species have turned away. Only humans seem unable to do so. Ambassador Kyung-min looked uncomfortable. Commander, the Concordance has made it clear. If humanity attempts to investigate this signal, there will be consequences. Trade sanctions, restricted travel, possible expulsion from the Concordance. Tae-sung looked at his crew. Hana's face showed determination. Dae-hyun looked worried but ready. Engineer Jae-won, standing near the engine readouts, gave a small nod. Let me understand this correctly, Tae-sung said. Someone has been calling for help for 3,000 years. Everyone heard them. Everyone ignored them. And if we try to help, we will be punished. Correct, Veltar said. For your own safety, Commander. And for the stability of the Concordance. Tae-sung felt something settle in his mind. It was not a difficult decision. It was perhaps the easiest decision he had ever made. Then I suppose we will be punished, he said. Kyung-min closed her eyes. Commander, think about what you are doing. Humanity has only been part of the Concordance for 50 years. We are still new. We cannot afford to make enemies. Ambassador, with respect, I did not join Starfleet to ignore people in distress. None of us did. Velthar made a sound like stones grinding together. You will regret this, human. The signal calls to you because you are vulnerable. Your empathy is not a strength. It is a weakness that will destroy you. Maybe, Tae-sung said. But we are going anyway. The transmission ended. The bridge was silent for a moment. Well, Jae-won said from the engine station. I guess we are criminals now. Not criminals, Hana said. Just humans. Tae-sung sat in his command chair. He brought up the navigation system. Set course for Sector 771 Omega, maximum speed. Sir, Dae-hyun said, we will be leaving Concordance-protected space. We will be on our own. I know. The Concordance might send ships to stop us. I know. We have no idea what we will find there. I know that too, Lieutenant. Tae-sung looked around at his crew. Anyone who wants to leave can take a shuttle to the nearest station. I will not order you to follow me into this. It needs to be your choice. Nobody moved. Stupid humans. Jae-won muttered with a small smile. All of us. Dr. Minji, the ship's psychologist, had been quiet during the entire exchange. Now she spoke up. Commander, I have been studying the signal's effects on the crew. Everyone who hears it reports the same feelings. Sadness, urgency, the need to help. It is unlike anything I have seen. Is it dangerous? Tae-sung asked. I do not know, but it is definitely affecting us. Whatever is broadcasting this signal, it reaches something deep in the human mind, something other species apparently do not have or have learned to shut off. Can you tell what it is saying? Hana turned in her chair. I have been working on that, Commander. It is incredibly complex. There are layers upon layers of information. Mathematical sequences, emotional frequencies, and what appears to be linguistic patterns from a language that does not match anything in the Concordance database. Keep working on it. I want to know what we are flying into. Yes, sir. The ship hummed as it changed course. Tae-sung watched the stars shift on the view screen. They were leaving safety behind. They were defying the most powerful coalition in the known galaxy. They were flying toward something that had frightened away 847 different species. And yet, Tae-sung felt certain they were doing the right thing. How long until we reach the sector? He asked. At maximum speed, 18 days, Jae-won replied. Then we have 18 days to figure out what we are walking into. Tae-sung stood and walked to the view screen. The signal played softly in the background, that same haunting combination of mathematics and sorrow. He wondered who was broadcasting it. He wondered why they had called for so long with no answer. He wondered if humans were brave or simply foolish. Perhaps both, he thought. Commander, Hana said softly. Why do you think we are the only ones who want to answer? Tae-sung thought about that question for a long moment. Maybe because we remember what it is like to be alone. Humanity spent thousands of years on Earth thinking we were the only intelligent life in the universe. We know what isolation feels like. We know what it means to call out into the dark and hear nothing back. He turned to face his crew. Someone is calling. We are going to answer. Whatever else happens, at least they will know someone heard them. Someone cared enough to come. The horizon's edge accelerated into the darkness, carrying its crew of humans toward a mystery that had waited 3,000 years for someone foolish enough, or compassionate enough, to respond. The meeting room in Seoul was packed with people who never thought they would be in the same room together. Military generals sat next to scientists. Politicians argued with engineers. Representatives from 20 nations crowded around tables covered with printouts and tablets, showing data from the Arctic site. Taemin stood at the front with Minji and Junho, presenting their findings for the 5th time that week. His voice was hoarse from talking, his eyes red from lack of sleep. But every time he told the story of Vorin and the Vrix, people listened like their lives depended on it, because they did. The linguistics team has completed translation of 70% of Vorin's database, Jihai said, taking over the presentation. She pulled up images on the large screen behind her. What we've learned is disturbing. The Vrix Empire operates on a cycle of cultivation and harvest. They've been doing this for millions of years. The screen showed a map of the galaxy with thousands of stars marked in red. Each red star represented a world that had been harvested. The sheer number made several people in the room gasp. They're farmers, a British general muttered. They're farming us. Not exactly, Jihai corrected. Farmers care for their crops. The Vrix simply mark promising worlds and return when life has evolved to a useful point. They take what they want and leave the rest to die or recover. Then they mark the world again for another cycle. Elena Volkov, the Russian representative, stood up. She had been skeptical from the beginning, suspecting this was some elaborate Korean scheme for military advantage. But 3 days at the Arctic site had convinced her the threat was real. How long do we have? Minji stepped forward. Based on Vorin's calculations and the last recorded Vrix visit 20,000 years ago, their harvest fleet should arrive in approximately 8 to 12 years. But there's a complication. She changed the image to show something new. Deep Space Telescope data from the past week, showing an anomaly moving toward the inner solar system. This was detected 4 days ago by observatories in Chile and Hawaii. We've been tracking it constantly. The object is decelerating, which means it's under intelligent control. Its trajectory will bring it to Earth orbit in approximately 6 months. A scout ship, General Nam said quietly. He was the highest-ranking military officer present, a man who had spent 40 years preparing for conventional wars. Now he was facing something no human military had ever trained for. They sent a scout ahead of the main fleet. That's our assessment, Taemin confirmed.
Vorin's logs mention this pattern?
The Vrix sent a scout to verify the harvest world hasn't been destroyed by natural disaster or nuclear war. The scout confirms the population is ready, then signals for the harvest fleet. The room erupted in arguments. Some wanted to try communicating with the scout. Others suggested hiding all traces of advanced civilization. A few optimists proposed diplomacy, hoping the Vrix could be reasoned with. Prime Minister Kang Ji-won raised her hand for silence. She was a short woman with gray hair and a reputation for making difficult decisions. What do Vorin's records say about negotiating with the Vrix? Jihai pulled up a specific log entry. Vorin's people tried negotiation 17 times during their war. Every attempt ended the same way. The Vrix don't recognize other species as equals. To them, we're resources. You can't negotiate with someone who sees you as livestock. Then we fight, said Colonel Sunho. We've been preparing for war since we climbed down from trees. This enemy is just different. Different in ways that matter, Junho interjected. He pulled up schematics of Vorin's ship. The technology gap is enormous. This ship is 50,000 years old and its power systems are still beyond anything we can build. The Vrix technology will be even more advanced. Our weapons won't hurt them. So we use their weapons, Minji said. Everyone turned to look at her. Vorin left us his ship's weapon systems. They're designed to fight the Vrix. We reverse engineer them, build our own versions. We have 6 months. A French scientist laughed bitterly. 6 months to understand and recreate technology that's 50,000 years ahead of us? Impossible. Not impossible, countered Dr. Han Subin, an aerospace engineer who had been studying the ship's systems. He was a thin man with nervous energy, always in motion. Difficult, yes. The ship's reactor uses zero-point energy extraction, pulling power from quantum fluctuations in space itself. The weapons work by destabilizing molecular bonds, essentially turning matter into energy. I don't fully understand the physics yet, but the ship's AI has been teaching me. Teaching you? Elena looked suspicious. You're trusting an alien AI? I'm learning from it, Subin corrected. There's a difference. Vorin programmed it to help whoever found the ship. It's not sentient, just very sophisticated instructional software, and it works. I've already built a small-scale version of the power system. It produces more energy than a nuclear reactor in a device the size of my fist. He held up his hand, showing a small metallic sphere. It hummed softly, and the lights in the room flickered as it interfaced with the building's power grid. This is generating 5 megawatts right now. The ship's main reactor generates 1,000 times more. If we can build even a crude copy, we can power weapons that might actually hurt a Vrick's ship. Hope flickered in the room like a candle in the dark. People leaned forward, asking questions, suggesting possibilities. But Taman saw Jihai's expression and knew there was more. "Tell them the rest," he said quietly. Jihai nodded reluctantly. "I found something in Vorin's personal logs yesterday. It's about why he came to Earth specifically." She pulled up a star map. Vorin wasn't just fleeing randomly. He was looking for cultivation worlds because he knew the Vricks wouldn't search them thoroughly. They avoid their marked worlds until harvest time, believing primitive species can't threaten them. "Smart choice for hiding," General Nam observed. "Yes, but here's the problem." Vorin checked the Vricks database before he fled. He saw Earth's file. The Vricks marked our world during 3 separate visits. Once 2 million years ago when they found early human ancestors. Once 500,000 years ago when they found Homo erectus. And once 20,000 years ago when they found Homo sapiens. Hana, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. 3 visits means 3 markers. 3 sets of coordinates. We're not just another cultivation world to them. We're a priority target. Why? Someone asked. Jihai showed images from Vorin's database. Ancient humans using tools, creating fire, painting caves, burying their dead with ceremony. The Vricks found something in humans they don't see often. Adaptability, creativity, the ability to solve problems in unexpected ways. They marked us as a premium harvest, the kind of species they can turn into scientists, engineers, strategists. Useful slaves. The room went silent, the weight of it pressed down on everyone. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to avoid becoming tools for an empire that saw them as valuable property. "There's more," Taman said. He had been saving this for when people were ready to hear it. Junho found beacon data in Vorin's navigation logs. The Vricks left 3 beacons in our solar system. 1 near Mars, 1 in the asteroid belt, 1 beyond Neptune. These beacons have been broadcasting our world's coordinates to Vrick space for thousands of years. "Can we destroy them?" asked Prime Minister Kang. "The Mars beacon, maybe," Junho said. "We could mount a mission in a few months. But the others are too far. We don't have ships that can reach them in time, and destroying them might just alert the Vricks that something's wrong." Subin was nodding, his mind already working through possibilities. "We could use Vorin's weapons designed to create a planetary defense system. Not ship-based, but ground-based or orbital. We place weapons platforms around Earth. Hide them among our existing satellites and space stations. When the scout ship arrives, we'll be ready." "1 shot," Minji said. "We'll get 1 shot at this. If we miss or if the weapons don't work, the scout will transmit to the harvest fleet and we're finished." The meeting continued for hours, plans forming and reforming. Resources were allocated, scientists were recruited, manufacturing facilities were repurposed. The Arctic site became the center of a global effort that made the space race look small by comparison. 3 months later, Taman stood in a converted factory in South Korea, watching the first weapon prototype being tested. It was mounted on a massive frame, pointing at a reinforced target chamber. Subin counted down from 10, his hand hovering over the activation switch. The weapon fired. There was no sound, no visible beam, but the solid steel target simply vanished, converted to heat and light in a microsecond. The chamber walls glowed red from the released energy. "It works," Subin said simply. "We can hurt them." Above the Earth, the Vrick scout ship continued its approach, unaware that the primitive species it was coming to catalog had found an old friend's warning and decided not to go quietly into extinction. The hologram spoke in a language that nobody on Earth had ever heard, yet somehow the words felt important, urgent. Taman stood frozen as the alien figure gestured with long, elegant fingers. The recording had been waiting here for thousands of years, and now it finally had an audience. "Can we understand any of this?" Hana asked through the radio. She had descended into the ship with a portable computer system, her fingers already working across the keyboard. Junho moved carefully around the chamber, scanning everything with his equipment. "The ship's systems are still active. There's a data core here, still powered. If I can interface with it, maybe we can get translation software." "Be careful," Taman warned. We don't know what activating the wrong system might do, but Junho was already connecting his quantum computer to what looked like a control panel. The young engineer had always been fearless with technology, treating unknown systems like puzzles waiting to be solved. Symbols cascaded across his screen, patterns that looked random at first but gradually began to form structures. "It's learning our technology," Junho said with amazement. "The ship's systems are analyzing my computer and building a bridge between our languages. This is incredible artificial intelligence." The hologram stuttered and paused. Then it began again, and this time words appeared in the air beneath the alien's image. Korean text, translated in real time by systems built before human writing even existed. "I am Ambassador Vorin of the Malthorian Imperial Remnant," the hologram said. The voice was deep and resonant. "If you are seeing this message, then intelligent life has emerged on this world. I do not know how many cycles have passed since my crash. I do not know if my people still exist among the stars, but I leave this message as both warning and apology." Minji pulled out her camera, recording everything. Her hands trembled slightly. "This is really happening. We're listening to an alien ambassador," the hologram continued. "I came to this world fleeing a great war. My civilization, ancient and powerful, made the mistake of believing ourselves untouchable. We were wrong. The Vrix Empire swept through our territory like a plague. They do not conquer for resources or territory. They conquer to consume. They take species that show promise and break them, remake them into tools and weapons." Vorin's image showed scenes of destruction, ships burning in space, planets turning dark. Masses of beings marched into enormous vessels. The images were clear enough to convey horror without needing translation. "The Vrix follow a cycle," Vorin explained. "They identify worlds with primitive life. They mark these worlds in their great archives and move on. Then they return every 50,000 of your years to harvest whatever has evolved. They believe this creates the strongest slaves, the most useful servants." Taman felt his blood run cold. "He's saying Earth was marked. We were supposed to be harvested. 20,000 years ago, by my reckoning, the Vrix scout fleet visited this system," the hologram said, as if answering Taman's thought. "I witnessed their arrival while hiding behind your moon. They surveyed your world, cataloged the primitive humans they found using tools of stone and fire. The Vrix were pleased. They left beacons in your outer system, markers to guide their harvest fleet when the time came." Hana sat down heavily on the floor. "We were tagged, like animals in a zoo." The hologram shifted and Vorin's expression became tired, sad. "I was dying from my wounds, my ship crippled beyond repair. I made calculations and realized the Vrix harvest fleet would return to this world in approximately 50,000 years from my crash. I thought about warning the primitive humans I had observed. But what could I tell them? They had no written language, no technology, no means to defend themselves or even understand the threat. So he left the ship," Minji said quietly. "He left it as a message in a bottle for whoever evolved here." Vorin nodded as if he had heard her. "I have secured all my navigation data, all tactical information on Vrix fleet movements and weak points. I have included schematics for Malthorian defensive weapons. Perhaps you, whoever you are, will have advanced enough to use this knowledge. Perhaps you will succeed where my people failed." The hologram paused, and Vorin seemed to look directly at them. "I spent my final days observing your species. I watched them create art on cave walls. I watched them care for their injured and mourn their dead. I watched them look up at the stars with wonder. They were so fragile, so limited. I confess I did not think they would survive long enough to find this message. If you are human, if you are their descendants, then you have surprised me. Perhaps that is your species' greatest talent." The message ended and the hologram faded. The chamber seemed darker without it, colder despite the temperature being unchanged. The 4 team members stood in silence, processing what they had just learned. "We need to report this immediately," Taman said. "This is beyond anything we can handle alone." They spent the next 2 hours documenting everything, taking samples, photographing every surface. When they finally climbed back to the surface, dawn was breaking across the Arctic. The sky was painted in shades of pink and gold, beautiful and peaceful. It seemed impossible that somewhere out there an enemy was coming. The message went out through encrypted channels to the Korean government. Within 6 hours, military helicopters were approaching their site. Within 12 hours, Colonel Baek Sunho arrived with a full security team. Sunho was a stern man in his 50s with gray temples and eyes that missed nothing. He descended into the ship with his own experts and emerged 2 hours later looking shaken. "This changes everything," he said simply. A week later, the site had been transformed. The small research station was now surrounded by military tents, security fences, and sophisticated equipment. Scientists from Seoul had joined them, along with linguists, engineers, and military strategists. The United Nations had been informed, though the full details were being carefully controlled. Dr. Yoon Ji-hai, a brilliant linguist, arrived on the third day. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. Within hours of accessing the ship's database, she'd begun decoding the Malthorian language beyond the basic translation software. "It's mathematical," she explained to Taman over dinner in the main tent. "Their written language is based on geometric principles. Every symbol contains layers of meaning, context embedded in the shapes themselves. It's the most efficient communication system I've ever encountered." "Can you read Voron's personal logs?" Minji asked. She had barely left the site, sleeping in 4-hour shifts so she could spend maximum time studying the ship. Ji-hai nodded. "I've been working through them." Voron was more than an ambassador. He was a scholar, an explorer. His logs show he visited dozens of worlds. He seemed genuinely interested in primitive cultures and studying how life developed in different environments. What did he think of humans? Hana wanted to know. Ji-hai smiled sadly. He was fascinated and disappointed. He watched early humans for weeks before he died. He documented their tool use, their social structures, their early language, but he kept writing the same thing over and over. "They are not ready. They will never be ready in time." That night, Taman couldn't sleep. He walked out into the Arctic darkness and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, according to Voron's calculations, the Vrix were coming. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but soon. The 50,000-year cycle was almost complete. He thought about those early humans Voron had observed. People with stone tools and fire looking up at the same stars, wondering what they meant. Those people had no idea they had been marked for harvest. They had no idea an alien ambassador was watching them, had judged them and found them wanting. But those primitive people had survived. They had grown, adapted, built civilizations. They had split the atom, walked on the moon, sent probes beyond the solar system. Voron had been wrong about humans giving up. The question was whether he had been wrong about them not being ready. A sound made Taman turn. General Nam Sung-min had arrived, stepping out of a helicopter with a delegation from the UN. Among them was a stern-looking Russian woman, who Taman would learn was Elena Volkov, here to ensure Korean scientists weren't hiding anything. The politics were beginning. But politics were human problems, and right now Taman realized they had much bigger concerns. High above the Earth, far beyond where any human telescope could detect it, something moved between the stars. It had been moving for a long time, following ancient coordinates approaching a world marked for harvest. The Vrix were patient. They could afford to be. In their experience, primitive species never saw them coming. 10 years had passed since the day the Vrix harvest fleet arrived at Earth. 10 years since humanity had stared extinction in the face and said no. 10 years since everything changed. Taman stood in the memorial hall built at the Arctic site, looking at the preserved spacecraft that had started it all. Voron's ship was now protected under a massive dome, maintained exactly as they had found it. Millions of visitors came here every year to see the vessel that had saved humanity by accident. "Do you think he'd be surprised?" Minji asked, joining Taman by the viewing platform. She had gray in her hair now, and lines around her eyes from years of squinting at computer screens, but her voice still had that edge of excitement it always carried. "Surprise doesn't begin to cover it," Taman replied. Voron saw primitive humans with stone tools. Now those same humans have colonies on Mars and defensive stations around every planet in the solar system. The story of what happened after the scout ship's destruction had become legend. Humanity had 47 days to prepare for the harvest fleet, and they had used every single one. The platform's success had proven that Voron's weapons could hurt the Vrix. The question was whether humanity could build enough of them in time. The answer had been no. Not enough to stop an entire fleet. But Junho had come up with something cleverer. Instead of building more space-based weapons, they had turned Earth itself into a fortress. Thousands of weapon emplacements hidden across the planet, in cities and mountains and deserts and oceans. Some were obvious military installations. Others were disguised as office buildings, cell phone towers, even hidden in underground parking garages. When the Vrix harvest fleet arrived, they found a world that looked wounded and desperate. The humans had left evidence of the scout ship's destruction everywhere. Wreckage floating in orbit, burned cities, signs of panic. The fleet's commanders assumed the humans had gotten lucky, destroyed one ship through some fluke. They assumed the harvest would proceed with minimal additional difficulty. They were wrong. The harvest fleet had consisted of 17 ships, each one larger than the scout. They descended in formation, confident and arrogant, ready to begin the process they had performed thousands of times. Their shields were at full strength. Their harvesting equipment was active. They broadcast the same message of compliance and threatened extinction for resistance. Earth's response was to light up like a star. Thousands of weapons fired simultaneously from every continent. Every ocean, every ice cap, the sky filled with directed energy that didn't look like beams so much as ripples in reality. The Vrix ship's shields held for almost 10 seconds. Then they began to fail. 3 ships were destroyed in the first minute. 4 more in the next 2 minutes. The remaining 10 tried to retreat. But humanity had learned strategy from Voron's tactical database. Captain Kyungmi, now commanding an entire fleet of human ships built with combined Earth and Malthorian technology, had positioned her forces to cut off escape routes. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it ended, 14 Vrix ships were destroyed. 3 had managed to escape, fleeing into deep space with human weapons tearing at their hulls. They would carry a message back to the Vrix Empire. Earth was no longer a cultivation world. It was a fortress world, and the humans were no longer prey. In the memorial hall, Hana approached with her 2 children. She was a full professor now at Seoul National University, teaching xenobiology to students who actually had alien life to study. "I'm giving a lecture on Voron's observations in an hour. Want to sit in?" "I've heard it before," Taman said with a smile. "But I never get tired of it." The lecture hall was packed with students from dozens of nations. Earth's education system had become truly global after the Vrix attack. Information was too valuable to hoard. Science was too important to slow down with bureaucracy. Hana's lectures were famous for making alien biology accessible and fascinating. Voron spent weeks observing early humans, Hana began, displaying cave paintings on the screen behind her. He documented everything: tool use, social structures, emotional responses, and in every log entry, he wrote about how impressed and how disappointed he was. Impressed by human creativity, disappointed by human limitations. A student raised her hand. "What did he get wrong?" Hana smiled. What didn't he get wrong? Voron assumed humans would never develop fast enough to face the Vrix. He assumed we would still be primitive when the harvest fleet arrived. He failed to account for humanity's greatest strength. We don't accept limitations. We see obstacles as challenges. When someone tells us something is impossible, we take it as a dare. The students laughed. They had grown up in a post-contact world, where the impossible happened regularly. They attended schools that taught both earth science and Malthorian physics. They dreamed of careers exploring the galaxy that had once seemed so distant and now felt like their backyard. Across the solar system, things that would have seemed like science fiction a decade ago were now routine. Mars had 3 permanent settlements with a combined population of 50,000. The asteroid belt hosted mining operations that provided raw materials for new ships and stations. Jupiter's moons held research facilities studying the gas giant's radiation belts and using them to power experimental technologies. And beyond Neptune, past the orbit where Voron's ship had entered the solar system all those millennia ago, humanity was building something audacious. The Gateway, they called it. A massive station that would serve as a jumping-off point for interstellar travel. Using technology learned from Voron's ship and improved by human engineers, the Gateway would allow humanity to reach other star systems within years instead of centuries. In the Military Command Center in Geneva, General Nam reviewed reports from deep space monitoring stations. He was older now, retired from active duty but still consulting on Earth's defense systems. The Vrix hadn't returned after their defeat, but nobody believed they had given up. An empire that old didn't surrender after one loss. Any activity? Colonel Sunho asked, joining him at the displays. Sunho had been promoted to head of the Solar Defense Initiative, commanding fleets that would have been science fiction when he was young. Nothing in our immediate space, Nam replied, but the long-range sensors are picking up increased activity in the sector where the surviving Vrix ships fled. They're talking to someone, building something. We hurt them, but we didn't break them. Good, Sunho said, surprising Nam with his response. If they attack again, we'll be ready. And this time we won't let any escape. The confidence wasn't arrogance. It was earned through a decade of continuous improvement. Human ships now used hybrid propulsion systems that combined human engineering with Malthorian principles. Human weapons were being constantly refined and upgraded, and most importantly, humanity was no longer alone. The first contact with another alien species had happened 5 years ago. A Malthorian survey ship, one of the few survivors of their war with the Vrix, had detected human radio signals and investigated. They had expected to find ruins or Vrix occupation. Instead, they found a thriving civilization that had successfully defended itself, using weapons their own people had designed. The Malthorians had been shocked, then intrigued, then enthusiastic. They shared more technology, more knowledge. In return, humanity shared something the Malthorians had lost during their long war: hope. The idea that the Vrix could be beaten, could be stopped. That loss didn't have to be permanent. Now there was an alliance. Small, fragile, but growing. Earth and the Malthorian remnant, along with 3 other species that had survived Vrix attacks through luck or isolation. They called themselves the Free Systems Coalition. And their purpose was simple: make sure the Vrix could never harvest another world. In the Arctic Memorial, Taemin walked through the exhibit showing humanity's transformation. Pictures of the first battle, of Captain Kyungmi's platform firing on the scout ship, videos of the Harvest Fleet's destruction, schematics of the ships humanity now built, testimonials from the first human colonists on Mars, the first human explorers to reach another star system. But his favorite exhibit was the smallest one, a simple display showing Vorian's final log entry, the one Jihai had found and translated in those desperate early months. "I am dying," Vorian had written. "My wounds are beyond healing and my ship will be my tomb. I have done what I can to warn whoever finds this vessel, though I fear it will not be enough." The humans I have observed are resourceful and curious, but they are so far behind the development curve. By the time they evolve to understand this message, the Vrix will have already harvested them. The entry continued. "I confess to feeling regret. These humans, for all their limitations, have something my people lost long ago. They have hope even in darkness. They have compassion even when it brings them no benefit. They look at the stars and see wonder instead of resources. Perhaps if my people had kept these qualities, we would not have fallen so far." The final line had become famous, quoted in schools and memorials across Earth. If I am wrong about these humans, if they somehow survive what is coming, then perhaps they will succeed where we failed. Perhaps they will show the galaxy that strength is not just in weapons and shields, but in refusing to surrender your spirit, even when all seems lost.